we bring on now, we've been decided, Buck and I did a while back as the tariff process has played itself out. Let's bring on people with strong economic backgrounds to talk with all of you. Yesterday, we had Art Laffer on at the same time. Today, we have on Stephen Moore, President Trump's former senior economic advisor. He is right now the co-founder of Committee to Unleash Prosperity. And we bring him in now. And, Stephen, I appreciate you making the time for us. You've been on. It's been a couple of years since you were on with us last. What do you think from an economic perspective the millions of people listening to us right now should know about what President Trump is doing and its impact?
Well, Clay, thanks so much for having me. And by the way, how cool is that you had Art Laffer on, the most famous economist in the world, yesterday? And,
not bad. Kind of cool. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And I have to say that he and I wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday, urging Trump to, let's just offer these countries zero tariffs and see if they'll lower their tariffs to zero, we'd lower ours. And I think that was the impetus for Trump putting this proposal on the table, which I thought was fantastic. You're right. Yesterday was the biggest point increase in the Dow Jones in the history of the stock market. Now it's down today, but it's not down nearly as much as it was up yesterday. And look, this is going to be a topsy-turvy market for the next number of months until we get this settled. But I got to tell you, having worked with Donald Trump and seen him in action up front and personal, this guy is 3 steps ahead of everybody else on the chessboard. He is a master negotiator. He knows what he's doing. And in the end, I think my first advice to people, just now would be a terrible time to sell. You never want to sell when stocks have been falling. That's violating the first rule of stock investing. You want to buy low and sell high, but sometimes people get panicked. No, that's number one. Number two, I believe what Trump is trying to do from an economic standpoint is his strategy is to isolate the bad actor, the new Soviet Union of the world, and that is China. China is a country that is a national security and economic security threat to the United States, as I think they are to the free world. And so what he's trying to do, I think, is unite the rest of the world against China, a kind of decouple from them because they are such a threat. And I think that strategy can work, but we're going to find out. We're going to really see whether or who our friends and allies are and who are our enemies. Where will Europe be? Will they stand with us? What about Britain? Will they stand with us? What about Japan? What about Canada? We need to unite. Trump is the guy to do it, but we'll see.
Okay, so let's dive into this. You mentioned people who own stocks right now, which is a huge percentage.
Most of us.
Yeah, a huge percentage of our audience out there, either in pensions, 401ks, or people buying and selling individual stocks. What would you tell people who are nervous, apprehensive, maybe pay attention to stock prices only when they're really kind of popping in one way or the other? How should they handle emotional reactions to valuations on the stock market from your perspective as a highly trained, highly successful economist?
Well, I'm an economist. I'm not a financial analyst. And sometimes economists are not great stock pickers. One of the greatest economists who ever lived was Milton Friedman, and he was terrible at stock investing. So I'll say that as a prelude to but the advice I'm going to give to your listeners is really pretty straightforward, and I think almost every financial analyst would agree with me. It's called stocks for the long run.
Yeah.
So in other words, if you're investing for returns 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, depending on what your age is, you want to be in the American stock market. It goes up. It goes up. Now, that doesn't mean that you get these kind of downturns, but the real rate of return of the U.S. stock market since the New York Stock Exchange opened its doors is like 7%.
Yep.
So what I'm saying is, if you don't have to take your money out, if you're not cash squeezed right now, keep it in the market because it's going to do well over time. And again, I'm not saying a year from now, maybe a year from now it may be a little bit lower. What I'm saying is I feel very, very strongly that 3 years from now, 5 years from now, you're going to get a nice return on your money. And if anything, I'd be buying stock right now, not selling it.
Okay, let's go into China in particular, because this is obviously now the focus based on the way the president has responded with yesterday's news. He really has isolated China. Tariffs up now to 145% on China. From your perspective, what does a fair economic deal with China look like?
Well, China cheats. They steal. They steal our intellectual property. They steal our patents. It is a very predatory nation. So I think we have to be very tough with China. And by the way, you're talking to a guy who's a free trader. You know, I like free trade. I'm not a big fan of tariffs. I agree with 80% of what Trump is doing. I'm not a huge fan of tariffs. The only thing I would fault Trump on is that I think we should, why is he going after Canada and some of our allies? We really have to focus on China, and I think that's where he is right now. That's the issue. I mean, come on, China's on the verge of possibly invading Taiwan. They're building up their military in a very aggressive way. Their tariffs are 3 to 4 times higher than ours are. And I want to make sure that your listeners understand this. I do a lot of, I'm doing like the BBC. I do a lot of like media in like Europe and Japan. They're interested in what Trump's going to do. And they're so they're self-righteous, and they're like, why is Trump doing this? He's starting a trade war. And I said, wait a minute, what are you people talking about? We have the lowest tariffs in the world. Their tariffs are higher than ours. So how can they say we're starting a trade war?
No, it's a fantastic question, and one we've been asking on this program for some time. Okay, so you in general are a free trader. Yeah. There is a tension, and it certainly has been, I think, exposed to some degree between, say, Elon Musk, who is more of a free trader than not, and Peter Navarro, who is very much not a free trader. So here is the challenge so far as I can see it, is you kind of have a schism, for lack of a better way to describe it. What Trump is advocating for on one hand is free trade. And yesterday, talking with Art Laffer, I said free trade with Europe can make sense, Japan, South Korea, so-called good actors, right, for lack of a better way to describe it. Right. Then there are, I think it's fair to say, bad actors, and China would be the most prominent and powerful among them. How do you balance the free trade perspectives with a country that is not committed to free trade and end up with a deal that makes sense across the board from your perspective?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm going to give you a kind of historical parallel. In the 1930s, we were a pretty free trade country, and we were trading with Japan. We almost literally sold them the lead and the steel that they used for the bombs that they dropped on Pearl Harbor. So that was kind of a dumb thing to do. And no doubt. So do we really want to do that again with China? I say no. I think we need to really be very cautious about China. I also like, and by the way, Trump has changed my mind a little bit on this stuff because I've watched him in action. I used to be like a unilateral free trader. We should have low tariffs no matter what other countries do. I no longer believe that. I think Trump is right that look. I like this idea of reciprocity. If you're going to hit us in the nose with a 20% tariff, you know what? We're going to hit you in the nose. And if you keep it up, we're going to ratchet it. I think at the end of the day, I really believe this, that Trump is going to force these other countries to play by the rules, create a level playing field that benefits everyone.
Okay, we're talking with Stephen Moore, Trump economic advisor, very successful economist. Let me ask you this question, big picture. I'm sure you remember this well. I was a young guy at the time, but in the 1980s, those of us who remember the 1980s, the idea was Japan was going to buy up everything. Their economy was on fire. They were growing like crazy. And there was a great deal of fear about Japanese ownership of American assets. Yes. Now, 40 years later, the Japan economy is around the same size-ish, at least according to the stock market. Is China somewhat like Japan, where you're going to see this massive growth and then they're kind of going to run into a wall? Now, here we know the demographics. China's population is likely going to decline. There are also, it's getting more expensive to make goods in China, which is how, as economies rise, the expectation of workers increases. Do you see a parallel potentially between the rapid rise that we saw with Japan and then the plateau with what we have seen with China as well?
Yeah, and even more so. Look, China is a centrally planned economy that is run by their government. It is run out of Beijing. One lesson of history, you're a historian, I am a bit too. One of the most important lessons of economic history is that central planning does not work.
Right.
Right? It does not work. It didn't work for the Soviet Union. It's not going to work for China. So China's economy will implode. And I'm not saying it's going to happen next year, but it will implode. It's going to happen because we have a free enterprise system where we let capital markets and our small businessmen and women make the decisions. They have the government making the decision. Who are you going to bet on?
No, I agree. Okay, so let me ask you this last question. I appreciate the time. I know how busy you are doing interviews all over the world. Who has more short-term pressure on them in a tariff war by your analysis, China or the United States? Whose economy suffers more as we go back and forth, stare each other down?
Well, look, when we sneeze, China catches pneumonia. They have to trade with us. If we stopped at trading with China, it would hurt our economy, but their economy would go into a Great Depression. That's the leverage that we have over China, and Trump is playing that card. But it's a complicated question because they don't face elections.
Yes.
President Xi, what's going to stop him? He may be willing to throw his economy into a depression. Luckily, we are a democratic country, and so, our pain threshold is probably a lot less than theirs are because they're run by a dictator.
No doubt. Well, that's an interesting way of contemplating it. I know I said last question, but what do you think Chairman Xi is hearing and thinking as this process plays out? I think a lot of people can get into Trump's mind and understand the United States perspective. What do you think the China perspective is right now?
I think they're scared. It's not being covered by the media, but their market has fallen much more than ours has.
Yeah.
Did you know they are facing a very, very severe recession. So I think they're freaked out right now. They don't know how to deal with Trump. I think Trump has the upper hand here, and I'm going to bet on Trump in America, not China.
Stephen Moore, I loved the editorial that you and Art Laffer penned for the Wall Street Journal. We appreciate you coming on, and thank Art again. I need to text him to thank him for coming on yesterday. We appreciate your expertise, and anytime you want to come on, let us know.
Okay, thanks so much. Take care.
It's great. I mean, you just heard from two of the most prominent economists in the world, frankly, in the last 2 days here. I'll take some of your questions. By the way, the cabinet meeting continuing right now as I am looking up. Elon Musk is attending the cabinet meeting and speaking. It is live right now on CNN and Fox News. We are monitoring it, and we will bring you whatever we have got in terms of news there. Look, I was down with Buck last week in Miami and went over to his place, and his awesome wife, Carrie, and he, what we did? We had steaks. They came from Good Ranchers, and they were absolutely fantastic. I've talked about this. My wife does a great job cooking steaks for the boys. The Travis boys are big fans of steaks. They are rapidly growing. If you got young kids, 17, 14, and 10 are my three boys. They eat a lot of food, and they love all of the Good Ranchers food that is coming to our doors, whether it's chicken, whether it's steak, whether it's salmon, even chicken nuggets for the 10-year-old who thinks chicken nuggets are the greatest thing that have ever existed. If you got a 10-year-old, you probably know what I'm talking about. They will ship this overnight, boxed, right amount of dry ice, careful packaging. I got to tell you, free of antibiotics and seed oil. These are American Rancher-produced products that are brought right to your table. You're going to love them. You can pick the perfect package for your family. GoodRanchers.com. Go online. You can select exactly the food that you want coming to your house. Again, could be the cowboy box, the tailgate, even the family feast bundle. They even have some designed already for you, which have been very popular with families across the nation. If you put my name Clay in, you get $40 off. Free bacon, ground beef, chicken nuggets, or salmon for a year as well when you make your purchase, plus $40 off. Again, it's a heck of an offer. Go to GoodRanchers.com, code CLAY, shop, subscribe, and stand with American Ranchers. We love it on our table in the Travis household. Just had it with Buck down in Miami. Trust me, you're going to love these guys. Great American-owned business using great American Ranchers. The best possible food direct to your family. GoodRanchers.com, code CLAY. Great offer, $40 off when you go to Good Ranchers. American meat delivered.